Hello, I just thought I'd come on this morning really quickly and to introduce myself again, because I know some of you might know who I am. And so when you see some random person on the internet, you know, there's a big question about why you should listen to them. Should you listen to them? And I want to give you some information about myself so that you can work out whether or not I'm somebody that you would like to listen to or pay attention to. So here we go. So who am I? My name is Laura Maelstrom, and I have a background in education. So I used to be a lecturer for a while, and I've taught music and English. My undergrad is in music. I'm currently studying a master's in psychology, and I've got a huge background in neurodiversity, education, medicine, and I've also worked in things like dentistry and things like that as well. Now, that's my work side. Most people love that stuff because it's like, what are your certificates? There you go, there's some of them. But who am I as a human being? That's a whole different question. So I grew up with a lot of kind of stuff in my life. I felt like I was in a home that didn't really support me. There was a lot of difficulties, a lot of turmoil, probably undiagnosed neurodivergent people raising me. And as a result, you know, they didn't always kind of get it right. I completely forgive those people, so I've got no reason to kind of sit here and throw dirty laundering out and around. But for me, I felt that I was pretty kind of emotionally neglected. As somebody who's emotionally very kind of in tune and empathic, I found the difficulties that my parents were going through, I kind of didn't want to add to them. And so I shut down a lot, I hid a lot. And as a result, from the age of about 8, when my grandfather passed away, I kind of like consciously decided that I was just going to bottle everything up and that I wasn't going to, you know, share anything about myself with my parents, because I didn't want to stress them out. And my dad worked an awful lot. He's a managing director of a big business, and so, you know, he worked a lot, and when I saw him, most of the time that I saw him was when we were on holiday and stuff. So, you know, it was a time to have joy and happiness, hopefully. And so I was very alone. I spent a lot of time alone. We lived in the countryside in the middle of nowhere, didn't have a bus route, I didn't have neighbours. So I spent a lot of my time alone. You know, I'd get a private bus to school and then get a private bus home, and my only socialising really with other children was at school, and school wasn't a great place for me. The subjects that I was good in, you know, I really enjoyed, and I got on really well with those teachers, but the subjects that I wasn't good in, I just wasn't interested in it in any way, shape or form, and I really struggled with some of those topics, with some of those subjects. And as a result, you know, the things that I was good in and the things that I enjoyed, I did really well in. And some of those things that I found more difficult, I struggled in. And you know, I didn't really know how to kind of socialise with the other kids in a way that made sense to them. So I found myself bullied quite a lot. I found myself alone quite a lot. Although I did find like a group of friends in primary school and in secondary school, there was always issues. You know, and this obviously has come out now that it's, you know, it was undiagnosed autism and ADHD, but at the time I didn't really know why I was different, or why people didn't like me, or what I was doing wrong, or why I wasn't making friends with people. And I just kept on trying, you know, and one of the things that I tried was masking. So I decided that I was going to become a whole different person. I was going to pretend to be somebody that I wasn't. And it's like I became an undercover actor, you know, or an undercover police officer, you know, something like that, you know, FBI. You know, I just put this mask on, and I was going to be this good student, so the teachers liked me. And I was going to try and be the cool girl, you know, and I was going to try and be the sexy girl, and I was going to try and be the fun girl. And basically what I did was I just worked out what everybody wanted from me, and then I did it. And that was absolutely fucking soul crushing, because I just pretended to be somebody for everybody else. And I can remember this was so apparent at one point, because I was like friends with some hippie people, and then friends with some kids from my 6th form who were pretty straight-laced, and then friends with these other kids who were like goths. And I would change my outfits You know, my outfits would change, the way that I spoke would change, what I said I liked would change. I would just pretend to be this whole different person, depending on who I was with. And it was just like I was just this constant chameleon, you know, and it was exhausting. And nobody knew me. Nobody knew me. Nobody knew who I was, which was even more painful. You know, it's like you're pretending so much to be all of these things that everybody wants. And often you're still falling short. Often you're still having, you know, problems with people, and you're still having, you know, people are still picking on you, and people are still saying that they don't like you, and, you know, you're still having friendship issues with people. And I think one of the biggest things, you know, about neurotypical people that don't mask, when they encounter somebody who is neurodivergent, who is masking, it triggers them, and rightly so, because in the same way when I meet a narcissist who's pretending to be, you know, God's gift, and I'm just like, ew, ew, can I see your real self, please, so I don't have to pretend to be with this thing that you're showing me. You know, human beings pick up on lies. They pick up on people when people are being disingenuous. And unfortunately, that happened to me. You know, a lot of people probably thought I was a bitch. They probably thought I was a liar, and they thought I was being disingenuous. And ultimately, when you're masking, you are being disingenuous. You are lying. You are lying. And so, you know, I can't kind of judge the neurotypical people or those people around me at the time who didn't like me and picked up on something that was kind of janky about me, because ultimately I was pretending to be somebody. So this kind of progressed, and at 15 I had a nervous breakdown, a really severe nervous breakdown, as a result of like masking and not knowing I was neurodivergent, having, you know, I started to suffer really pretty severe depression from the age of about 11. So by the time we got to 15, and this is from the age of 8, of just bottling things up, being bullied, being picked on, like constant anxiety, constant fear about what was going to happen at school, and how I was going to be treated and what was going to go on, and all of this kind of real anxiety on a daily basis with no real support, because, you know, I shut down and my parents didn't really kind of spot it, and I'm really good at hiding stuff, you know, and I'd started self-harming. I don't know when I started self-harming. I don't really know how that came up at some point. I don't really know what kind of causes a child to think to themselves, you know, if I'll start cutting myself. But at some point in secondary school, that started to happen, and it became a coping mechanism for me. And ultimately, it was an addiction, because, you know, it does make you feel bad. Like, don't do it, obviously. But, you know, when you do that, it does kind of like release a lot of endorphins. And so for me, I was in so much emotional pain. When I cut myself, it distracted myself from my emotional pain, which is a really horrific thing to kind of think about. But, you know, that's kind of where I was at. And, you know, I'd also, you know, had binge eating, you know, ADHDers that seek out dopamine. So sugar was a thing that I was having real kind of problems with. And I had kind of like compulsive eating behaviors. At home, couldn't kind of stop eating sugary food and salty food. And obviously that was me trying to get dopamine from an external source. And so by 15, you know, 15 years of old, I was like 15 stone, 16 stone. I can remember putting on a stone in weight, like every year from the age of like 9 or something. And I was just getting bigger and bigger and more depressed, and I was self-harming. And it all kind of hit this culmination of, you know, one night when I was about 15, when I just had a nervous breakdown, and it was just like my brain just collapsed in on itself. You know, I had like hours and hours and hours worth of panic attacks in that evening. My mum was like, I don't really know what to do with you. She found out that I'd been self-harming, and that was kind of like the beginning of me entering into the mental health system, where you know, I was under kind of like, you know, under suicide watch, and they wanted to section me and all of this sort of stuff. And this was the beginning of the journey to the woman that you see sat in front of you now, a completely different transformation from where I was. And it was a very long journey, and trust me, 15 wasn't where it ended. You know, from 15, I went into the mental health system, and I had a community care team, and that was a real severe interventions from then until the age of about kind of 25 maybe, where it kind of stopped, and it stopped being so kind of severe. And, you know, I kind of you know, for that period of time, you know, drug use got a lot worse. I went from, you know, well, I didn't even say that. I started taking drugs. So I, you know, about 16, 17, I think somebody introduced me to weed. And then weed was so good. Oh my God, as an ADHDer, it's a dopaminergic drug. So, you know, I started smoking weed, and that became like an addiction for me, that I was smoking like 20 joints a day at one point. You know, getting through like a quarter of weed, like a week. And, and smoking from sun up till sundown, and I'd wake up in the night and I couldn't sleep, and I would go and have a joint. So literally just high all day, all night. And then I started finding other drugs, and then I got this really severe issue with drugs where I just couldn't be without drugs, basically. And obviously I was self-medicating my ADHD. And as a result, I lost jobs. I stole from people. You know, I shoplifted. Is that a word? You know, I did loads of bad things, you know, and during this time I was really trying really hard, you know, and I think people on the outside, again, I was just pretending that I was great, and, you know, I'd go and get jobs and people would think I was amazing, and then obviously it would all kind of fall through within sort of 6 to 9 months, because I just wasn't able to keep up the mask that I was okay, that I was well, that I was mentally stable, because it wasn't. You know, I wasn't mentally stable. I was still suicidal. I was still suffering from really bad depression. And the only thing that made me feel good or made me feel happy was taking drugs. And as a result, you know, drugs became this real focus for me. You know, I started taking MDMA quite a lot, like all day long at one point. And, you know, cocaine became a massive issue for me. You know, I became a cocaine addict where I was just like, all day long, every day. You know, at one point I can remember I was working at Ask Italian, actually, and I was taking cocaine before my shift, during my shift, and then going home, and it was like I was taking drugs to go to work to pay for the drugs. And it's like, you know, I started to realize that, you know, this was something that I was doing, and I was like, what is my world? Like, what is my life? This is insane. And I got, you know, I would get sacked from jobs because I was just messy, and I was like, you know, I'd take time off work, and, you know, I was sick all the time because, you know, I was smoking all the time, and I was partying all the time, and I wasn't sleeping enough, I wasn't eating properly. At 19, I got anorexia and bulimia. So I was like 265 pounds when I was like 19, which is like, I don't even know how much, like 130 kilos or something like that, 140 kilos. And I'm 5'7", just to be clear. So I was a big girl. I had like a 54-inch waist, and was like, I can remember stepping on one of those scales, and it was like, you are 54% fat. And I was horrified, because I was like, oh my God, I'm literally over 50% fat. I'm more fat than I am in anything else. How horrific was that? So something clicked, and you know, I think because I was getting dopamine from drugs as well, you know, I started to develop like an exercise addiction, and I started to develop anorexia and bulimia. And, you know, my anorexia got so bad at one point, you know, I was like just fasting. I was like having an apple, like if I really had to, because I was going to pass out, I could have an apple. I can remember my bulimia was so bad, I ate a salad one day in a car, and I was like, oh God, I can't keep that down. I have to get rid of that. And then there was no toilets around. I was in a car park. I was waiting for my partner at the time, my boyfriend at the time, to come back to the car. So I'm sitting in the car waiting for him, and I'd eaten a salad, and then I was like, oh, you know, the bulimia brain kicks in, and I was just like, you can't have that, you can't keep that, you got to get rid of that. So I went to go to the toilet in the car park, but they were locked. So my body is in absolute panic at this point, and I'm like, I don't know, I can't have this. I can't, you know, bulimia is like a phobia of food, and it's like you have to get it out, because there's this like phobia, like you're so frightened of putting on weight and gaining weight. And I remember throwing up in a bag, like in a carrier bag, in the carrier bag that my salad had come in, like in a car. I was that sick at the time, you know, and just horrific stuff. I look back at it now and I'm like, who the hell was that girl, that poor girl, like going through all of this stuff and going through it predominantly alone, you know? And during this time, you know, it was messy. Yes, I had lots of fun. You know, there was a lot of drugs. You know, at this point, I was a cocaine addict. I can remember my dad chucked me out at the age of 19, and I ended up going to live in this like 1 bedroom, you know, like bed sit kind of place. And there was this horrible landlord who kind of wanted to have sex with me, and I didn't get it because autism. And he was really abusive towards me at one point, you know, and it was very scary. I can remember some of the worst self-harming I'd actually ever done was as a result of him screaming at me, chasing me down from the kitchen to my bedroom, shoving his foot in my door, and me like trying to slam the door on him because he's screaming at me. And this all started because I tried to get the Hoover out from underneath the stairs, and there was a metal bed frame there, and the metal tube of the Hoover just clanged against the bed thing, you know. And John, my landlord, was upstairs in the kitchen because, I don't know, he always used to just come round and do things in the house. I don't know why. He was weird. And actually, like, he shouldn't have been doing that. You know, he shouldn't be doing that. He should have been kind of like, you know, letting people just get on in their home. But because I'd kind of not slept with him, and because I'd kind of like asked to move my boyfriend in, he'd gotten butthurt about it all. And I can remember him screaming like, "And now you're smashing my house up," ran down the stairs. And I was just like, what? I was just so taken aback. And I was like, I've just been traumatized from kind of like, you know, these kind of violent situations before. So I just kind of went down into complete like, fight or flight mode. And I was just like, what? I didn't even know what was happening. And then he chased me into my room, and I'm trying to kind of close the door on him because it was terrifying, you know. And I was like 19, and this guy was like in his 40s, and it's like, what the hell are you doing? When I look back at it, I just think this guy was such a fucking scumbag of a human being, you know. And I can remember when I left, he stole my letters from the new estate agent that he'd given a bad referral to, saying that I hadn't paid my rent, which is not true. I paid my rent. And he stole the letters. So I didn't know that I didn't have a place to live in. Like, can you imagine? And then he had the gall to write me a letter saying that he treated me well, and that as I grew up, I would realise what a good guy he was. Like, no, John, if you're watching this, you're a fucking piece of shit. You're a narcissist. You got sad because a young girl wouldn't sleep with you. And because your wife came round and I was talking to her, hi, Laura, you know, just talking to her as a general human being, he got scared that I was going to do something because he was a bad person that was doing bad things. And as a result, started treating me like shit. So, no, he's a bad person. I was a bad person, but I wasn't a bad person to John. Just to let that one out there. Still salty about that one. I'll work on that one. So anyway, so I moved into this flat, and we're seeing my boyfriend. We did end up getting a place to live, and then I got hit by a car. Oh my god, I got hit by a car. So I was on crutches when all this happened. Like when I was moving, and all this stuff happened with that landlord, which was even more traumatic, as I'd been hit by a car and my leg was just fucked. I was in loads of pain. I had like PTSD from the accident, and then you get all this shit going on with this fucking asshole who's trying to make you homeless because you won't fuck him. Like, Jesus Christ. We did end up finding a place to live. Luckily, we managed to speak to the people who we thought we were moving in with, and they took a chance on us, bless them. And we lived there for a while. But I mean, you know, when you're traumatized, you just create so much drama in your life, you know. And I created so many problems in my life with with the boyfriend that I'd moved in with, you know, because I cheated on him and I did shitty things, and we were cocaine addicts, and he was like he's like 14 years older than me as well, so I mean that was a mess. And it was just a mess. And I just kind of it was a mess for a long time. And you know, from the age of 19 to kind of 23, you know, things were a mess. There was a lot of drugs, there was a lot of like raving, there was a lot of partying. At 23, I broke up with my partner, and at that boyfriend that we'd moved in with, because I cheated on him and it was a mess. And then started, you know, an absolute phenomenal hoe season of just, you know, whatever, trying to find somebody that loved me, looking for love in all the wrong places, lots of raving, lots of drugs, getting hugely into debt. I think I got kind of like 25,000 pound in debt. And yeah, it was a horrific time. It was a horrific time that led me to a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. And at one point, you know, I decided at 23, I was like, I'm going to go to college. Like, I'd been kicked out of my A-levels for drugs and not engaging. And then I decided at 23 that I was going to go to college. And and I did go to college, and that was the beginning of a big thing for me, where things began to change, because it's like, you know, I'm a singer, and I started studying music, and my lecturers, God bless my lecturers, that put up with me and tried and worked with me. I could cry, because they really helped me to see that I was worth more than what I thought I was, and actually give me confidence to go forward and do things. And that's probably why I became a teacher, because I wanted to make a change for people's lives in the same way that my lecturers, Clive Stocker, Lee Risdale, bless them, still friends with them on Facebook. I talk about Clive Stocker in my book. If you want to read my book, guys, you can get it free in my academy, in the free resources in my academy. There's an audio book there, and you can read the paper version. And it talks about kind of like my story, but also all of the things that I put in place from mind, body, and spirit to get myself out of these things. So if you want to access that, that's free, and you can get that via the link in my bio. But you know, I began this pathway towards, you know, learning and education and feeling like I was worth something again. I was still a drug addict the whole way through college, very messy still, very unwell still. And, you know, and then suddenly I got into university, and things began to change when I left the city that I was born in. I decided to, you know, move away, and things began to change when I left the city that I was born in. I decided to, you know, move away and go somewhere. I got into uni, and I moved to Cardiff, and I started a BA in music. And when I moved, I quit drugs and I quit everything, and you know, and that was the beginning of a new start for me, with new people, a new place, and new everything, you know. And that was you know, it was hard, and life began to really change for me. And then in 2017, I set up my coaching business. Oh, thank you. It's loads of different things. I started to set up, you know, my coaching business, and I've been working with people since 2017 to help them to change their lives, to heal from neurodiversity. I got diagnosed with autism last year. The year before that, I got diagnosed with ADHD. And prior to that, I was actually a lecturer in specialising in neurodiversity in Wales, which is why I kind of realised I was neurodivergent. So now I take all of the learning that I've done as a lecturer, and I'm studying psychology at the moment as a master's. And I've been working with people one-to-one and in groups for the last sort of 7 years. And I'm here to help people's lives, one person at a time, you know. And if you are somebody that knows that they've got more, that they have, you know, you're going through hell, and you know that there's still that glimmer of hope that you could have a better life, and that there is something out there for you, then go and check out the free resources in my academy. You can see it via the link in my bio. There's an audiobook there. There's a 7-day course that helps to kind of change some of your mindset, and with some top tips in there. And you can also, you know, listen to the audiobook, read the book on there as well. And there's some meditations in there and stuff. So I work holistically with people, and I basically give the transformation that I've had to people. And I've worked with hundreds of people who've changed their lives. I've got 3 channels on here. If you don't know, this is my new channel. You can go and check out my other channels, the Neurodiversity Fairy. Over there, I've got like 17,500 followers, I think, millions of views. And I've helped millions of people on that channel. On my other channel is a spirituality channel, which is Empress Tarot Easter. You can go have a look at me over there. And again, millions of views, thousands of followers. So here I'm trying to bring everything together, because I want to be able to give spirituality, psychology, and neurodiversity as one big package. So I'd love for you to come join me in the academy. It's free to join. As I said, the link is in my bio. I got to go now because I've got an appointment with a client. But I love you. Don't give up. If you have stuff that's going on inside of you and it feels like it's too hard to bear, remember that this too shall pass, and it's just a moment. It's just a moment in time. Things do get better if you keep trying, and don't stop trying, because the devil works hard, but you got to work harder. Okay? I love you. Don't stop. Don't give up. Don't let yourself down. Don't let it go. Life gets better. I'll see you all soon. Thanks for joining. Bye, guys.